What happens when a creative pastime becomes a way into the past? What happens when gaps and ellipses become spaces of potential meaning? What happens when scraps and loose ends, both in the materials we use and our histories, is all that we have to go on? These are the questions that we're going to answer in our special live recording of the Rippling Pages, the podcast where you can rely on writers to get real about writing. Let's have some literary realism. I'm here today talking to Alice Hattrick. I'm your host, crafter and curator of the Rippling Pages, Liam Bishop. Delighted to have you here. Alice has joined us from London. Ill Feelings, their first book, indeed weaved autobiography, science, art history, reportage and polemic to explore the impact of chronic illness on theirs and their mothers' lives. It was published by Fitzcarraldo Editions in 2021. Alice is a critic too. Their criticism has been published in Art Review, Freeze, The White Review, Tank, among other publications. They've also worked to make the arts more accessible with the Access document for artists, and that was made in collaboration with Leah Clements and the late Lizzie Rose. Alice also teaches the University of Arts in London. But we're here today to talk about Alice's new book, Fancy Work, again published by Fitzcarraldo Editions, a home for Nobel Prize winners and emerging writers. This book is brand new, Alice. Your book is brand new, so we're here as part of your new book tour, and of course the Leeds Literature Festival. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you to the Hyde Park Book Club for having us. And thank you to the wonderful indie bookshop, the Bookish Type, for coming along and selling books too. But Alice, you are a writer that I admire tremendously. I loved your book, Fancy Work, for its bold and beautiful exploration of embroidery as a gateway into the literary and cultural history of its form. I loved it for its ideas about love. I also loved it for its sheer dedication to the life and relationship of Mae Morris and MF. We're going to find out more about very soon. Let's give Alice a warm welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming out. I really appreciate you being here. There has been 10Ks and road races, and it's also a very nice day. But Alice, of course, thank you for joining us and coming up to Leeds all the way from London. How have you found Leeds so far?
It's lovely. I love Leeds. I was saying before that I came to do an open day for university about 1,000 years ago, and I was so really pleased to be back. It's absolutely gorgeous, and obviously it has such a rich textile history. So I feel like even though the subject of my book is this more kind of handmade, intimate, personal connection to textiles, I feel like it's still a really interesting place to have a conversation about.
Absolutely, we're going to get into that. We were talking a little bit about this, and it was also there's traces of this industry everywhere in the north, and that's a political history as well. You know, the money that's been taken out of the towns when these industries have moved away. Give us then just a little bit more about this book.
So, Fancy Work is really it's a kind of work of life writing about my own life and mixing it with the kind of history and biography. Which is kind of how I figured out how to write with Ill Feelings, is kind of mixing up these different genres that are usually kept separate. And I like to think they kind of contaminate each other and make it a bit more interesting. But yeah, so Fancy Work kind of is centered on the life and work of Mae Morris, who was William Morris's daughter. He was an embroiderer, designer, and really kind of had a significant role in the arts and crafts movement. But for the last 20 years of her life, she also lived with a gender non-conforming land worker called MF. And so I wanted to explore this part of her life that is maybe not so publicly known or hasn't really been researched or written about. Fairly focusing on the significant contribution she had to the movement.
Yes.
But so I wanted to kind of approach this part of her life and think about, try and find these kind of scraps or pieces or fragments of the traces of their life together. And think about what we can still know from what is lost as well as what survives.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone knows. Just has anyone heard of the Morris? And we've got some embroiderers in the room. This family incredibly influential. William was incredibly influential. Mae was influential, and the I don't know if you could just talk a little bit about then, and we're going to get into everything you've just spoken about there and the way that you write about history, but just May Morrison. May's really important to this story, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Who was May, and what was May's relationship to the art form?
So she was also the daughter of Jane Morris, who, as well as William Morris, and they together, William and Jane, and other families in the arts and crafts movement. It was kind of like a family. It was called the Firm, was like the nickname. Is that everyone worked for the Firm. It was like a kind of family business. As well as this kind of commercial operation, they also kind of spent a lot of energy developing ways to like revive old stitches and old ways of making, weaving, and all sorts of textile related practices as part of this kind of wider project of like reviving medieval craft. And I guess what is interesting about women's role in the movement is that it was very domestic, like kind of, we might say, limited to the domestic in terms of the crafts that they were encouraged to take up. So obviously May wanted to be a painter. She wasn't allowed to be a painter. She had to kind of work in the textiles kind of area. But she ended up running the embroidery department at age 23, which was pretty, as a kind of as a job, probably quite intense. But actually, it was a really important part of the business, selling these embroidery kits that people could do at home, as well as like upper middle class women could do it at home, obviously, because they had the time to make up these kits. But then they were also embroidering in the studio as well. Yes. So after William Morris died, and she didn't have to do this job anymore, basically. And I'm sure it was like a pretty amazing and freeing in its own way to work for the Firm, but that she has this kind of afterlife where she's still kind of taking care of her family's legacy. So she's taking care of William Morris's collected writing. She's editing them all into they take up like this much on a shelf. Like it's a kind of an epic, editing all of those and writing all these introductions that are really biographical and worth, reading those. But I was also interested in this life, like what happened after, like when she's not completely tied to the Morris legacy, but she's been brought up within it. Yeah. So she also started the Women's Art Guild. Because women weren't allowed in the art guild, so she made one that she was very, very politically active in terms of the working rights of women in the arts and crafts. So she's very influential in that sense. Yeah. More than the suffrage movement. She wasn't really involved in the suffrage movement. She was really focused on the labour rights of women and making sure that women could work.
There's you spoke about it there, and I'd like to speak about Jane Morris, because she was from a working class background. Yes. Yeah. But also in relation to that, you spoke about this idea of May looks back in history, of precedents, and that's what you do. And you talk about May unpicking previous designs. Now, I'm not embroidered. Literally, I'm wearing loafers. I can't even tie my laces that very well. So you're not in the hands of the most dexterous person. But you talk about the way May literally unpicked history.
She didn't unpick them, because that would be sacrilege to start unpicking stuff. But Jane and William did do it. Okay. So these were stitches that had been basically lost that weren't practiced anymore. Right. So they were, because of this, it was called Opus Anglicanum. It's like a English work.
Before have I just pissed off a load of embroiderers about mine?
They're all going to be tweeting about this.
Walking out of the room. But sorry, the Opus Anglicus, yes.
Yes, it's which is this it was in the kind of 13th, 14th centuries when embroidery and English work. So we think of like the Bayeux tapestry or that kind of, that's what we're thinking about, that time period, where embroidery was as important as painting or sculpture or any other art form. It wasn't as tied to the domestic and the feminine as it was by the time May was,
right,
and by the time, you know, Victorian period, basically, which is really when those two things get really tied together: femininity, domesticity, that, and embroidery and sewing as a form of labor that would sort of contain women and make sure they didn't do anything that would disrupt a kind of the normative social rules at the time. So it was a way to kind of control, it's a form of control, basically. And working class women like Jane Morris were taught to do a very specific type of embroidery, which was not fancy work. It was actually really functional stitches, because they were being trained effectively. They weren't being taught to read or anything. Jane Morris could read, but it's kind of amazing that she had to access that
absolutely,
that kind. And she was very passionate about literature. Jane and like her sister and other women of her class, they would have been taught these functional stitches so they could go into domestic labor for upper class women and do all the sewing in the household. And so William Morris met Jane Morris, they get married. She's still very young, but she really enables a lot of this revival of stitches, because she can sew, and William Morris obviously can't sew, but he does try. And there is a kind of amazing embroidery in Kelmscott Manor, and his kind of go at embroidery. And it's this repeating motif. And I don't know I know some of you embroiderers, but the idea of repeating an embroidery motif over and over and over again, it's really boring. And that's kind of how he designed quite a lot of the embroideries. It's like, actually, we're a bit dull to sew. But Jane and the other women her sister and other women in the movement kind of basically turn it into this art form that is really important to the business and to the movement. And they do it all at home, and they do it all the time. So they're at the socialist meetings. They're there, they're present, but they're sewing. Henry James comes over. What's she doing? She's sewing. And it's like it becomes part of her myth in a way that I think.
You spoke about it there. You spoke about that idea actually of they are sewing all the time.
Yeah, they're sewing all the time.
And this labour is artwork is continually sort of going on.
It's completely part of their lives, and it's part of their socialist project, and it's not separate. But it's also part of this medieval kind of mythic presence. So Jane kind of becomes this like silent medieval woman with covered in these big embroideries that she's making. But May really turns it into something, I don't want to say like commercialized, but she kind of runs the business in that sense. But it's all kind of starts with that home environment. At the Red House, which is where May was born and where they lived originally, and it was like built for them by Philip Webb, his architect. It's kind of like the idea of an idyllic, idyllic place where you can live and work and everything is intermingled. Which is obviously so important to the arts and crafts kind of like ideology. That's where they sort of start conceiving of these completely wild schemes where like an entire hall would be filled with these the good women embroideries. And it's like, it's inconceivable they would never actually finish it, but the point was doing it. It was like the women really enacted a lot of the kind of ideas of the arts and crafts movement.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And I think what we should do in a moment is going to a reading.
Read.
You can go to
chatting away
if you like to. I mean, we can have a reading to give people a bit more of a picture. But that whole the lens that you apply to it, well, there's several different lenses. I would argue. And you've spoken about that revival, and some of that came through the subversive stitch Parker's book, and then the commentary on that, querying the subversive stitch. And so, but obviously also an important element of this is you and your journey and your arts and crafts and skills of embroidery and obviously writing. So why do we get a bit of a flavour of that through a reading?
No problem. So this is from, I'm just going to read like very early on. It's a chapter called Make a Thing, and hopefully it kind of introduces the book and why I wrote the book. I turned to embroidery when I lived alone. Stitching into fabrics I dyed with plants. I did not prick and pounce, as that was far too much labour and required forethought about the pattern I was going to embroider. It felt strange to plan a design before I'd even learned to stitch. Instead, I drew directly onto fabric, around pressed leaves and objects in my house, creating irregular circles that, when badly stitched, turned into spirals, bent and warped by my experienced hand. Quilters have always done this, drawn around plates and cups to make patterns that are both homely and abstract, indexing and animating domestic life. I drew around the covers of books I was reading and pieces of packaging from the recycling bin and chain stitched around those too. Sometimes I added words. I would always change the design as I went, reversing my decisions and making new, unexpected ones. I would keep adding more in, overlaying shapes, every line leading to another line, post-pandemic television on in the background, all those boring BBC crime dramas and unbearable Netflix dating shows. No offense if you like those shows. Stitching, pressing plants, and natural dyeing, called natural to distinguish it from industrial chemical dyeing, was a way of adapting to a place, a new home, and a new kind of time. I learned about dyes from foraging around the neighbourhood. Plants collected at different times of the year produce different tones, which can be modified with metals. In spring, the leaves of the hawthorn made an apricot-coloured dye. In summer, the tannins in yarrow reacted with iron to dye a dark purple-hued grey. In the colder months, I collected elderberry and willow, which makes pink if slowly heated for hours and hours. It's not that any of the dyes I made were really those colours. There is something in between about the dyes that these plants, many of which are called undesirable, commonplace, colonizing, self-seeding, found on rubbish tips and waste ground, produce. They are murkier, neither peach nor pink, yellow nor orange, brown nor green, certainly never blue. First I pressed plants and then I dyed with them. The stitching came later and happened slowly, over the kind of time that passes unnoticed, not linear or straight, not forwards and backwards, but spiraling, warping, slipping and sliding, the way time can break off and tumble away when bent by illness. Each process felt like making an alteration rather than producing something new, a transformation from one state to another. I tried to record my early dye experiments, noting down ideas for materials and reminders of each step in the process on scraps of paper, and saving small swatches of each piece of fabric, a record of the colours that these plants produced. Knowing nothing and everything can be approximated, but never completely replicated, that the past is inaccessible. I started sewing because I needed something to do with my hands, another way of thinking. Stitching, or writing for that matter, does not require that I work at a desk or a frame, although one can be used. It is inexpensive, needing only a scrap of ground fabric, thread, and a needle. It can be paused, put down for long periods, and taken up in short bursts. Most importantly, there is no deadline, no monetary value to extract from this labour, no need to know the result or even to properly finish anything. Embroidery, also known as fancy work, fancy meaning not necessary or needed, is just something that I'm doing, a joyful addition. It's resistant to linear, productive time. It's a lot like keeping a journal, coded teenage girl. Being made of plants and paper and fabric, all of it will degrade. The notion of embroidery as a female pursuit, practiced by meek and submissive women, is a deceitful fiction. Prior to the 17th century, or so second-wave feminist art historian Rosika Parker argues in her 1984 book, The Subversive Stitch, Embroidery and the Making of the Feminine, needlework was not associated with any one sex. Over time, embroidery became women's work, keeping girls away from promiscuity and disobedience. Needlework and femininity became synonymous with each other, despite both men and women being responsible for opus Anglicanum, the highly prized and luxurious embroideries made in English workshops, households, and nunneries during the 12th and 13th centuries. By the 19th century, Parker argues historians of embroidery had obscured its past, suggesting instead that embroidery had always been an inherently female activity. Needlework was used in schools to instill feminine and serene qualities in girls, supporting and sustaining the oppressive Victorian stereotype of women as the angels in the house. The history of embroidery is also one of resistance, complaint, refusal, and rage. In stitching, we might soothe unquiet minds, but it also makes time to process injustice and resist persecution, even to create characters and tell their stories. Applique, for example, makes fabric and thread into something stronger and potentially disruptive, impossible to ignore, a form of protest. At first, it had been a way of resisting loneliness. I began to reclaim time for the ornamental side of life, the side that does not make you any money, as an act of hope and repair. For a long time, most of the things I made were never finished, just put away to come back to another time, or not. Drawing, pressing, dyeing, and stitching all felt like ways of defying what I was supposed to be doing with my time as an adult, all these fancy loops. When we write, paint, garden, or sew, we never simply make a thing, Parker wrote in an article on creativity and aggression. Rather, we enter into a network of relationships with, for example, contemporary practices, with our own creative history, with materials, with colleagues, and of course, with imaginary audiences and internal figures. I was returning to childhood hobbies and to others in the past, eagerly entering a network of relationships with imaginary audiences and internal figures. In making, I entered a wider network still, all the unknown needleworkers, closeted queers, and incarcerated stitchers, feminist art historians and colonial plant histories, and all the hands that had touched the fabrics before me. One such figure was Mae Morris, who had herself looked to the past in which embroiderers, both men and women, were among the most important artists of the day, pushing beyond their prescribed limits and, in some cases, using needlework to defy the boundaries of gender itself. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Is that one of the first fancy work?
I think I've only done one reading of this.
Okay. But we've got a sense there, haven't we? We've got a sense of the history that's in there, your role in this, and this is you as a writer and your skill. And you can hear it there. You can hear all the layers of history that you're trying to balance in writing that piece of non-fiction. And so, I mean, for you, you spoke about this idea of you finding time to, this idea of the idea of sort of using your hands, and it's not something that has a deadline. So what was it that really drove you to start doing that and then start writing about it? When did those elements come together?
Yeah, I think it was definitely, as I say, in that section when I was living alone and I had more time. This is like during lockdowns and pandemics, that I felt like I had more time.
Yeah.
Despite the kind of horrific situation that we were in, I did feel like I had kind of free time, and I started sewing and making things in a way that I hadn't for so many years, because if I'm not working, like I need to be earning money. This is how I should be spending my time. Is how I felt, and honestly, how I feel now. Is that if I'm not working, I should be writing, and if I'm not writing, I should be working. Those doesn't sound like it makes any sense, but earning money.
We've got to earn it, folks.
Yeah.
We're letting you know today. You've got to earn some money. I'm afraid you've got to work.
Yeah, and
we understand.
And then I did kind of want to resist this feeling that I should be using all my time to earn money, basically. And I already had this feeling, I had these feelings tied up with writing anyway. And now I have them because when I'm sewing, I feel like I should be writing, and when I'm writing, I should be sewing. So it all gets kind of like, but I kind of find that it's just something like small and quiet and like contained, and it doesn't require like a lot of time, and I really enjoyed that sense of like being able to just pick something up and put it down, do it for like 10 minutes, and then but also I think what really drew me to it was like the sense of losing time. Like I could just make something and like lose hours, and then there'd be no evidence of that, of what I've made in that time or what had happened in that time, other than this really tiny little embroidery or like a pieced section of a quilt. And the amount of time and labor it took to make that thing isn't represented kind of visually or materially in the object that you've made. And I really enjoyed that. It brought me joy.
Does writing not do that sometimes?
No, writing brings me a lot of joy.
Okay.
But I think they're comparable.
Yeah. Okay.
Rather than in conflict with each other. Whereas they are both in conflict with
making money,
earning money.
Yeah. Okay. But you said, and I didn't mean that. I wasn't trying to be flippant, but no. Writing is hard sometimes.
Yes.
And you talk about getting to the end of a piece of embroidery, and it doesn't look the way you wanted it, and you've cut your fingers, and so it's just that idea of joy within a piece of art in relation to forms of labour, I guess.
Forms of labour, yeah. And like you could never, you would never be able to sell these things, because if you added up all the time it took you to make them, no one would ever be able to afford it. So they're not Finn agrees with me, and now shaking your head. Yeah, exactly. But that makes it, for that reason, I found it as it's a resistive practice, because you're kind of resisting this idea of productivity, or like definitely a kind of linear, progressive use of time. And and as someone who has found the concept of crypt time very helpful, as many people with chronic illness do, and crypt time just means time where, well, it's a kind of conception of time or reconception of time, which is not linear. It's flexible time. It's time where it might take you much longer to do something, or you might lose a load of time because you have to stay in the hospital and time kind of bends and warps. So this is kind of like a reconception of time. So, and this really spoke, I mean, you can hear it like bended, warped, like it's kind of textile metaphors. And so I wanted to think about the actual stitches, which also spoke to that kind of idea of time as not something linear, as something that loops or bends or, it's flexible.
I mean, on the subject of time then, and there is, the book is about time in some form or another, how you spend your time, how time gets distorted, but also how the sense of history and the sense of what time has passed. And then obviously what you're trying to do with this book is exploring the role of MF within May's life and the Morris's life more generally. So I don't know if you can just then tell us then about MF and then the lens that you were trying to apply to this work, because you're changing something that's not really been recorded in history.
Yeah. This is what really kind of made me want to write the book, which was there has been some really amazing scholarship around May Morris and her life and her work, and there's been an exhibition, and like there's an exhibition at the moment in Liverpool. Like there is a scholarship and attention being paid to May Morris. Kind of, but that's always what kind of interests me as like a queer writer, researcher, whatever, is that I'm like looking for the story that isn't being told.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's active. It's not like, it's not actively being hidden in any way. That's what I identified anyway. It was like more research needs to be done in this area, because we don't really know much about MF. We don't really know much about this part of May's life. And I think there are lots of reasons for that. A lot of it is because historians, academics, exhibition makers, like they're looking for evidence. They're looking for like hard factual evidence of their relationship.
Yeah.
Which is, in my opinion, not necessarily the way you're going to actually be able to think about these histories.
Why is that? Why is that not?
Well, there is this kind of this concept of like the empty archive, which is something that when you're thinking about past lives, past queer lives, you often encounter, just loss and absence, and it's not there. Queer people in the past were not making loads of records to document their queer lives. Like it's just not there. And so there are ways to think about history that are not through this, like, where's the evidence? And then initially I was like, I'm going to find the evidence.
Oh, you started out with that approach?
Yeah, but I didn't know this. I mean, I'm saying this now, like this whole thing, but like this is like my journey of understanding this. It's not going to necessarily be there, and if it is there, like how are you going to, like, maybe only queer people can see it. It was like how I was thinking, like if I read everything, I look through all the photographs and I like go through all the archives, like I'll see it, I'll find it.
Yeah.
And I think, and there is some hard factual evidence there. There's a photograph that I found that says our bedroom on the back, and it's like, that's a trace, that's a piece of evidence. I mean, it doesn't amount to very much. It's just this tiny fragment, but that's enough. And actually, these tiny gestures, and actually these silences. Silences are really loud. Like if there's a gap, it's like, well. There's something happened here, kind of thing. So,
and that's what you do. You hold them open. They are don't be too sort of poetic, but you use them as gateways.
Yes, exactly.
Meaning. And ephemerality is incredibly important.
Incredibly important. There's a Jose Esteban Munoz is really important to me. His book Cruising Utopia. It allowed me to think about. Or it just allowed me to just get rid of that idea, which is basically like trying to live up to like the straight way of doing history, which is like, find the evidence, put all the pieces together, and it'll kind of reveal something to you. But he was writing a lot about like these more gestural, ephemeral traces that might just be feelings, which sounds like really kind of like an illegitimate way of doing history, but it's kind of what we need to do. And it's also it is a legitimate way of, if you feel something, then that is what you need to follow, that those kind of feelings and rumors and things in the air, like this is what he kind of like writes about. So that's what I tried to do, is just follow my the feelings I had. And actually, if you go to Kelmscott Manor now, which is where they live, May and MF lived in Oxfordshire in the Morris kind of summer home. Effectively, they rented their whole kind of adult lives. She's not really there. She's like, it's kind of preserved and restored, and like it all looks gorgeous. But like her room with MF is not like, staged or, restored in any way. And she's there in like bits and pieces, but you go into like William Morris's bedroom, you get the sense of them, but she's really quite absent. And that's kind of her own fault. Is the story?
Whose fault?
May's fault, because she kind of like just did really well. Wrote down loads of objects in pencil. Didn't have any children, obviously. So when she died in 1938, she left. Obviously, MF was still in the house.
Yes.
MF survived for 5 months before they died.
Yeah.
And then everything was just sold.
Right.
In like an auction. And so you go to the house now, and they're like, May really messed up because everything was sold after she died, and they have to kind of like try and get things back. So she kind of curated herself out of the house as it is now. And I think they are doing a lot of work to like put her back in and then back in certain ways, but it's an uneasy kind of thing.
It's one hell of a challenge that you set yourself, and the way that you as you say, you apply this queer chronological history. There's also just the idea of, you speak about people like Walter Benjamin and Gillis Novus, and then there's just this idea of embroidery as a metaphor for unpicking histories. But it's also about you and your feelings. And you spoke there about this idea of like a boundary between, I had a feeling something was there,
Yeah.
So how did you, how much is this then about your feelings and balance? Because this could have been I've got a copy of the logbooks, which are from the bookish time. That's about ephemerality in one way, and about the LGBTQIA switchboard. But you could have written a book like that, I guess, but you chose to write this book in this way. So how did you? This is about you and your feelings, isn't it?
Yes, and I think that's a way to bring out or like enhance the subjectivity that I'm trying to kind of argue for. I think to write, if I was writing about ephemerality and rumor and feelings in the air, and then I guess it's just a way to like perform that or like make it part of the text. That this, you could write it as a sort of like straight history, biography, whatever. And I don't do that, but that's okay to do that, obviously. But I think, by including my own feelings, my own like life in it, it just kind of enhances that attempt to argue for a subjective history being like a legitimate way to write about history.
I mean, it's incredibly legitimate. It's just also that incredibly important book, but it's that sense of feelings that I know your first book is called
it's called Ill Feelings,
but the feelings that pervade the text. And I'm wondering, I'm not questioning. I'm more interested in the idea of like there's a lot of feeling of loss within the book, and I just wondered whether that there's a sense of the lost history.
There's lost history, yeah.
But that sense of, and if you look at someone like Butler, who you quote, and I don't think not sure how much our audience wants to go into heavy sort of political theory, but Butler writes about loss, and so how much was that a feeling for you?
There's a really good book by Heather Love called Feeling Backwards, I think it's called that.
That's not, I Will Trust You.
I don't always remember things, but I think it's called that.
Heather Love is, I know you.
Heather Love, I think it's called Feeling Backwards, but it's about like the queer experience as kind of being quite backwards, as in like we get really attached to the past and we get attached to lost things in the past. And she talks about this like, like there's this kind of insistence sometimes, this feeling. I know Pride's coming up with Leeds Pride's coming up. It's like feeling of pride, like we're supposed to kind of like really be focused on pride and not shame and not melancholy, or we're supposed to kind of hope for better, which I think, basically what she's arguing is that like we can't hope for better, we can't recognize the pain that's happening in the present unless we actually like keep those feelings of shame and don't try and work through them in order to we need those bad attachments, she calls them. I think that's really helpful as a way of thinking about a possible future and making a life for yourself when there is so much pain happening in the present, and we can only at the moment kind of think about more to come. Sadly, that is the kind of situation we're living in. Like it's not always going to get better. In lots of ways at the moment, things are getting a lot worse. So in terms of LGBTQIA rights,
of course.
And also the rights of disabled people. A lot of the things that I'm like writing about, basically, it's like we actually need to keep hold of these bad attachments, and we need to really, that's really important as well. I can't remember what your question was.
Well, either way, you've answered their question. So, but I think you spoke.
A question.
You spoke. I was asking about those feelings.
Oh yeah, those feelings.
But
also I have one thing to say about feelings. I was thinking about this recently.
Okay.
Just in relation to the two books together.
Yes.
It's interesting for me. I only just kind of realized this, that I'm really constantly trying to work out how I feel about things. What I think about things, but also through this idea of feeling or emotion. And I do think it's connected to my experience as a child, not to get like psychoanalytical about this or anything, but like I think the experience of being a child and growing up with disbelief and with, if I said something I was feeling ill, then I would be told that I wasn't, or like, like this every time I said that I was feeling something, it would never be confirmed. It would only be like, because there was no evidence.
Okay. And where was that coming from? It would get dismissed by who or whom? Or?
By, everyone apart from my mum, basically. Okay. So my experience, for anyone, I'll just explain the ill feelings a bit, is that I grew up with MECFS and my mum also had it. So we were told we were speaking, we had a shared hysterical language by medical professional that we'd kind of made this up ourselves. We were like conspiring against. So it was this very kind of Victorian idea of like gendered illness.
Yeah. You were not believed, essentially.
We weren't believed because there was no like evidence for any kind of physiological disease, basically. So that kind of trained me not to believe my feelings, not to believe like what I felt.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of interesting to think about in relation to this drive to still write about queer history, even though like there's not evidence and you have to kind of go on your feelings. And I think there's this kind of interesting link there that I didn't purposefully explore, but I feel like it's there now, which is kind of interesting to think about.
I think it's very important personal feelings which drive us, irrespective of where they take us.
It's a form of resistance, basically.
But it's also, I think it's about you and your relationship with your mother as well, who is in ill feelings and she's in this book as well, Fancy Work.
Yeah.
What was it like writing about the relationship with you and your mother in relation to some of the things you just said, but also just more generally?
Yeah, I actually started writing this one and I was like, I'm not gonna write about my mom anymore. Or like, I'm gonna take a break from that and I'm just gonna like write. I was like, had this kind of intention of like, I need to kind of focus on what I want my home life to be like. I want, my partner and like, we were, it's also a story of kind of like queer homemaking with her. And so I kind of, obviously, inevitably, that didn't work out. And my mum's, she started like sewing as well.
Yeah.
Kind of at the same time as I did. So we were kind of like getting into it at the same time. And she's really involved in projects that are really collective. So like making like quilts and banners and things that are kind of a form of protest, but that she will make with other people.
Yeah. What's the quilt called that she makes? And it's
there's one that's the Norwich Pride.
Yes. There's one she's doing with friends, but it's not finished. And
it's called the Tilted Women banner.
Okay.
and which is based. Yeah, she was involved in a project with Dolly's son, who has done a lot of work as part of her art practice to kind of explore the work of Lorena Bulwer, who was interned at a workhouse in East Anglia, and stitched these amazing scrolls. And you must look them up if you don't know about them, because they're full of rage, and she's just really angry about being kind of put into this situation by her brother. It's just horrendous, but when you can't write, you don't have access to the tools of like the pen and the pen and paper, I guess. But she did manage to get these scraps of material and thread. And so that's how she kind of used textiles as a form of resistance. And they're all in Norwich Castle Museum.
Yeah, and
but yeah, the children. I mean, she also the painful thing is that when she was being assessed for personal independent payments.
Your mother, this was, yes.
My mother. She didn't reach the criteria of like, I don't know if any of you have done this, but like you get scored on different criteria. You have to get above, I think a 3 or a 4 on enough of the criteria to get the higher rate of payments.
Yeah. PIP, this is,
yes. Yeah. So then, so the reason why she doesn't get 3 on mobility, or I think it's dexterity or mobility, is because she proved she could sew. So she has the dexterity to sew, and therefore, or she said she sewed, but she goes to a group once a month. You know, for her, that's like, I only do this much sewing, and what I would want to do, obviously, is a lot more sewing. So that was noted down as a reason to not give her what she does actually need, which is the higher rate of person-dependent payments as a disabled woman.
And that, I mean,
can't work.
I mean, I'm sorry to
so
hear
it ends
that.
up becoming her kind of undoing in a way that's like her. Yes, this form of resistance is you know, it can be penalized for it as well, even just the act of doing it.
Yeah. And it's about this book there is that sort of rage in ill feelings that there is in ill feelings, I think. But there are instances like that, which are obviously shocking. Terrible that your mum has to go through. But there are also, the tone is a little bit different, I would say, in fancy work. And I think there is I don't know if it's something that's changed with you and your relationship with, I don't know, the world or with your mother, but
I mean, it's clearly written in the kind of like aftermath of it.
Yeah.
I think ill feelings, I feel like, is more kind of like manifesto for like, these things need to be taken seriously, and this is I'm going to do all of this work to show you all these injustices that have happened around unexplained illness, and I wanted to kind of explore the ways that we respond to injustice, and that we react to it, that we make things to protest our injustice. And so it does kind of go through other forms of protest embroidery in different places in the world. And but yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of explore, was the ways we resist this injustice. So it sort of starts with injustice, it just isn't quite so kind of like angry.
Well, I don't
know. I think it has some moments.
It has moments for sure, but it's very. There's lots of love in there.
Yes.
And the core of it is this relationship, and it just felt different. It just felt like different, and it was very beautiful in that way.
Yes, more hopeful.
Yes, hopeful is the right word. Maybe. It felt more hopeful. Alice, it's been
Thank you so much.
An absolute blast. I really have enjoyed you being here. Are you going to hang around and sign some books for a little bit? But it has been an absolute blast having you up here in Leeds. Just one thing before we close. So there is a Rippling Pages Patreon for exclusive member benefits. You can sign up for Rippling Pages merch. And what I did today is we did a quick draw of some people who've won a free month's membership to the Patreon. And I've been given some names. And I'm going to read them out, and you are going to get a free month's subscription to the Rippling Pages. So I've got a couple of names here, and I've got one name. This was given from a list upstairs. I've got one name and an initial, and I've just got one first name. So you're going to have to stick your hands up. Okay. So, Alice, would you like to do the honours? Because that's part of the treat of the show. You get your name read out by a writer.
Wow.
So maybe if you go for that one, and I'll go for the second one.
KTR.
KTR. God, KTR! Yay! Yeah. Woo! And I've got Adina. Oh, Adina, you were late as well. You've done well there. So I'll find you after the show. Find me after the show, and we'll sort out. But otherwise, this is a book that I admire tremendously.
Thank you.
So is Ill Feelings. People are sick here of me talking about that book. So I really appreciate you coming here. Really appreciate you coming out for the Literature Festival. It's big thanks to the Literature Festival. Big thanks to High Power Book Club. Big thanks to you for coming out. Appreciate it. And stay around for a drink and a chat and buy some books from the bookish type. But let's give it up for our guest, Alice Hattrick.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.